Okay, in 4-2, we're going to look at amplitude, reflection, and period. All right, so we need our graphs that we did last time. So I've got my graph here. So it says graph y equals sine of x and y equals 2 sine of x between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so I'm going to show you these guys in my calculator so that you can just kind of see them. Now when I'm graphing them, I'm going to go from, oops, oh, it says 0 to 2 pi. Let's just see if I can do it, just see what it looks like. Okay, so we'll put 2 sine x in my calculator, and then, oh, we'll do sine of x, and then 2 sine of x. Okay, so there's my first graph. That's the one we did before. So 0 to 2 pi is technically from there to there. Maybe I should change my window. So there's 0 to 2 pi. So that's the first one. There's sine of x. That's the one that we graphed last time. And this pink one here is going to be 2 times the sine of x. Okay, so remember my amplitude is the distance from here up to here. Okay, so on this original one, the blue one, the amplitude was 1, and it repeated when I got to 2 pi. On the red guide, the amplitude changed, and now my amplitude is now 2. But my period is still 2 pi. Okay, so let's see what happens when we change it to cosine. So there's the original cosine. There's 2 times the cosine, right? So my amplitude here is 1 for cosine of x. Period is 2 pi. That's when it's repeating. This guy's amplitude is now 2, but its period is still 2 pi. So, in conclusion, if you have a number out front of your function, it changes your amplitude to a. So y equals a sine of x and y equals a cosine of x have an amplitude of a. Okay, so without graphing these guys, what's the amplitude for this guy? Well, he's got an a of 3. This guy's got an a of 1/4, so he's going to be flatter. He'll have an amplitude of 1/4. How about this guy, because he's got a negative? Guess what? Your amplitude is always a positive number. If you remember from our last set of notes, it was an absolute value. So this guy just has an amplitude of 2. Okay, well, what if they move, see where the 2 is now in front of the x? Okay, so let's watch what happens. I'm going to graph. I'm going to leave that sign as I'm going to do the first one as the sine of x. And then this guy I'll do as the sine of 2x so we can see the difference. Okay, so this is just sine of x. I'll do this one here in a second. This guy right here is 2 sine of 2x. Well, this time we see there's 1 full cycle, there's 2 full cycles, so its amplitude didn't change, right? It still has the same high points, so the amplitude is still 1. But this time my period is now, I see 2 of them. 2 pi divided by 2, so just pi. Okay, so cosine of 3x. Let's change this guy to cosine. Cosine of 3x. There's not a number out front, so my amplitude's not going to change. But notice how many times he starts over. There's 1, There's 2. There's 3. So in my 2 pi window, I see 3 of them. So its period is 2 pi over 3. So in conclusion, if you have a number in front of your x, they have a period of 2 pi over b. Okay, so it says for the find the amplitude, period, and cycles. So cycles just means how many times do you see it in 2 pi. All right, so if there's a number out front, you're going to have an amplitude. So this guy has an amplitude of 1. My period is going to be 2 pi over a half, which ends up being 4 pi, which means in my cycles, I'll see half of a cycle in 2 pi, because it takes me 4 pi to get back to my starting spot. Okay, number 6, 3 sine of 2x. So my amplitude's 3, my period is 2 pi over b, which is 2, so that guy's just pi. So I see 2 cycles from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, number 7. I got a number out front, so my amplitude is 4. Period is 2 pi over 3, which means I see 3 cycles in 2 pi. Okay, number 8. Amplitude, my a is 1/2. My period is 2 pi over pi, so I see my period is 2, which means I see pi cycles in 2 pi. It's a little different. All right. What happens if there's a negative out front? So let's look at number 9. It says graph 2 times the sine of x and negative 2 times the sine of x. All right, make your prediction. What do you think we're going to see? Okay, so I know my amplitude's 2. I know my amplitude's 2. We decided that negative doesn't change my amplitude. That negative just flips it across the x-axis. So my period is still 2 pi. I just graph it on the other side. Same thing if I did 3 times cosine. Negative 3 cosine. There's 3 cosine, so my amplitude is still 3 and 3. My period doesn't change, he's still 2 pi. Oops, sorry. It's graphing it. So if you have a negative out front, y equals a negative sine of x or negative a cosine of x, they reflect across the x-axis. Okay. All right, so last thing, this is the important part. It says graph one cycle of y equals 2 times the sine of pi x. Okay, so first of all, we're going to determine what our amplitude is. Right, our amplitude is 2, and my period is 2 pi over b. So 2 pi over pi, which is 2. Okay, so when we graph these guys, we're going to graph 5 points. We're going to graph along our x-axis. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. This point right here is 0. We'll talk about phase shifts at another time. This point up top here is positive 2. This point down here is negative 2. This is my period. Okay, so you've got 1, 2 graphed already. Then you're going to go halfway in the middle. 0 plus 1, or 0 plus 2 is 2, cut it in half is 1. 0 plus 1 is 1, cut it in half is 1/2. 1 plus 2 is 3, cut it in half is 3/2. Okay, now, remember what the graph of sine looks like, okay? The graph of sine starts here, it goes up, crosses down, back to 0. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to graph 5 points. Start at 0, up to my amplitude, back to 0, down to the bottom, back to 0. Now remember, he doesn't end there, so give him some tails. And he's going to look like that. And we just graphed one cycle of 2 times the sine of pi x. Okay, let's try one more. Graph one cycle of 4 cosine of 2/3 x. Okay, so my amplitude is 4. My period is 2 pi over 2/3, or 2 pi times 3 halves, or 3 pi. Okay, 0, 4, -4, make sure you put a 0 there. This endpoint is 3 pi. 0 plus 1 is 3. Cut it in half, so I can't cut it in half, so I'm going to give it a denominator, 3 halves pi. 1 in between, 1 in between. 0 plus 3 halves is 3 halves. You either half the top or double the bottom. 3 pi over 4. Alright, now this one gets a little bit trickier. I'm going to add these two guys together. That's 6 pi over 2. Okay, 3 plus 6 is 9. Either cut it in half or double the bottom, so this guy is 9 pi over 4. Now he's cosine, and remember that cosine starts at the top, so he's going to go top, 0, bottom, 0, top. Top, 0, bottom, 0, top. Give him some tails. There's a cosine. Okay, so that's what you're going to do on your homework. You're going to label your y-axis and then 5 points along the x-axis.